Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. Today we're talking about Antivirus is Dead, Long Live Managed Endpoint Security. And we're going to take a deep dive into the difference between a traditional antivirus program and a proper managed endpoint security that an average MSP can provide today. I'm your host today, Ali Mahmood. I've been in the high-tech industry for about the last 12 years and I'm really passionate about things like security, things that are hot button issues for every business nowadays. And I'm going to go into some of the really interesting stats from recent years, some of the big data breaches, trends in operating system security, trends in browser security, stuff that I'm really passionate about. And then talk about, really equipping our partners and MSPs out there to have an intelligent conversation with today's average business. So how can you sell more managed endpoint protection to the end user? Well, you can do that if you have the stats to back it up and you have a really good story to tell them. So jumping right into this, in the last 5 to 6 years, we've been seeing this increasing trend in major security breaches. So here I'm showing just breaches that were 20 million records or more stolen. So definitely we're not showing, your typical customer, the average SMB, but this just goes to show that, how common major breaches are. How common it is for hackers to want to get in, to steal customer information, to steal data that they can turn around and sell on the black market, sell credit card data, and sell other personal information. I was reading this infographic in this study just recently, and it was basically a guide on how the average person could become a hacker with just a couple $100. So you could go out, and it basically said if you had $200, you could buy a basic kit that would go in and do, key logging for keystrokes, so you could track what people are typing in when they go to their banking website. For $400, if you want to spend that much, you can go and now you can steal certain other information. And then when you started getting into the $1,000, $2,000 range, you actually had a kit that could go in and worm through a corporate network and steal tons of corporate data. So, it was basically the consumer's guide to hacking. And it's scary to think that the average person nowadays can go and buy an off-the-shelf product to perform these kinds of attacks. When we look at operating system market share and operating system vulnerability over the past couple years, we see a similar story of this increasing vulnerabilities. And we often get the question of, are operating systems getting more or less secure over time? Are web browsers getting more or less secure over time? So just before I get into that, if we look at, who's owning the OS share right now in the market, clearly the king is Windows 7 right now. Windows XP held the market for about 15 years. Vista was not able to transition people at all, so that when Windows 7 came along, we saw basically a mass exodus past Vista straight to Windows 7. Because people had that bad taste in their mouth from Vista, what we're seeing with Windows 8, if you look right down at the bottom, in 2012 it was 0.3%. That's really when it was released. But over the next couple years, we haven't seen it jump up. We don't even have it at 10% of the market right now. When we look at the Windows 7 versus Windows 8 adoption rate, you look at Windows 7 licenses sold from 2009 to 2012, and it's basically doubling almost every year. And these are hundreds of millions of licenses sold. When we look at the line graph trend, you can see that Windows 7 had that hockey stick. After the early adoption, it really took off and skyrocketed. Windows 8 really kind of has this slow plodding adoption rate, doubling every 1 to 2 years. So we're not expecting Windows 8 to really take over the market in the next couple years. Windows 7 is probably going to be around for 5 years. Windows 8, who knows how long it's going to take to get some solid market share. So all of that just to say that vulnerabilities are getting worse. So if we look at vulnerabilities by operating system, people thought that XP was bad and it had tons of problems, but it's actually getting worse as new versions of Windows come out. So Windows 7, Vista and 7 are identical basically. They were built on the same framework. They increased vulnerabilities a little bit, but in Windows 8, when they decided to bake IE kind of into the kernel and bake Flash into IE, What happened is they introduced all of the vulnerabilities associated with Flash directly into Windows. So that was basically, another 50 vulnerabilities that were just exposed in Windows 8. So the reason I showed the operating system share is that even if Windows 8 takes over 7, we can expect that operating system vulnerabilities are going to increase over the next 5 to 7 years. A lot of people will say, yeah, but I don't use Windows. I'm using OS X. I'm using Linux, and I do most of my work through a web browser. So we wanted to address that too. In 2012, it was a really tight race between Chrome and Internet Explorer, but Chrome has just really skyrocketed and is, the king of the market, basically doubling the next contender there. So the other three are totaling up to around 50%, with Chrome taking up 40% of the market today or more. These were as of September this year. So Chrome owning the market, let's take a look at our vulnerabilities for browsers getting better or worse. And really we see the same trend. We saw the major breaches are getting worse, operating system vulnerabilities are getting worse, and browser vulnerabilities are getting worse. The topic of today's webinar is about your standard antivirus program. So when people think about antivirus, they think about, in the 80s and the 90s, some of the early viruses which were really file infectors, basic viruses that duplicate themselves, have a single signature, and then antivirus software came along and said, I identify that file infector, it has a single signature, and then I can shut it down. So of those, Brian Dye from Symantec estimates that antivirus software catches less than 45% of all attacks that exist today. And really it's a bit of an old quote, but it just goes to show that this is becoming a minor problem. And as time progresses, it's going to be a negligible problem. It's going to be, 10%, 20% of the type of threats that are out there today. Hence the topic for today's webinar. So we're saying that antivirus is dead, and that's the traditional signature-based antivirus. Long live managed endpoint security. And I really want to define what that means. What can you be providing today to your customers to protect them? And why should how can you tell them and convince them to move away from their very basic signature-based antivirus? So the traditional way of preventing a threat was a new virus would be discovered, the antivirus company would identify that virus, create a signature that identified it, a user would download the signature and then scan their machine looking for that signature to say, this is the file that's infecting, quarantine it or delete it. The problem number one with that approach is that the average vulnerability window on that machine could be as long as 10 months before a fix would be found. Then after the fix is found, we're depending on the user to download that update and protect themselves. Really, this is not a security strategy. You want something that could exist on the machine that could actually catch that threat day one. Problem number two, relying on users. Everyone has hit the remind me later or the ignore button, and they just keep hitting it, daily or hourly, hoping that pop-up will go away. So really, depending on a user to protect themselves, to understand how important it is for security, and really that nuisance of them having to update themselves all the time, as a managed services provider or an IT business, you should be taking away that hassle from them and providing a better layer of security than they have today. The third problem, and I would call this the biggest problem with signature-based antivirus, is it can't protect against any of the modern attacks that we have today. So things like CryptoLocker and CryptoWall. These ransomwares that are locking down files, demanding a ransom, costing your users money, and if they don't pay and if they don't take the right approach with that, they could actually lose all of their data. So the fact that you can't protect against those attacks whatsoever with signature-based antivirus, in today's modern, digital threat landscape, we really shouldn't even be considering a basic antivirus, signature-based antivirus, as a valid solution. So just to summarize, it detects less than half of all attacks, could take days, weeks, or months before your users are protected, and it's not going to protect against any of the modern threats that are out there today. So on the flip side, we have managed endpoint security. And not all managed endpoint security solutions are created equal. So I wanted to tell you some of the things you should be looking for, when you're on the hunt for a really good managed security solution. If we compare managed security to signature-based antivirus, the approach that they take is very different. So signature-based antivirus, like I said, it just looks for those file signatures. It's basically looking for one stamp that identifies a file or a couple of files that it can quarantine and delete. Managed endpoint security does that as well. It has all of the benefits that signature-based does, but it also looks at behavior. So looking at file behavior means that a virus or a malware could actually change its shape, it could change its signature, change its identity, but if it acts the same way, I know that it's malicious. I know that that is very suspicious behavior and I'm going to shut it down. The other thing that it has is heuristics, and heuristics really, just think of them as metrics and counters that monitor the behavior of patterns and files in a different way. So they look at how much CPU does that file typically use, how much memory, what is the size of that file, what dates was it created on, things like that. And when you have both behavior-based detection and heuristics combined, you can capture basically all modern malware threats. When we look at what types of problems signature-based antivirus addresses, really it's just the old school virus, the file infector. Managed endpoint security, make sure that your solution can address all classes of malware. So file infectors, of course, but more importantly, things like grayware, ransomware, rootkits and backdoors, things that are going to get in the back door through your network and really hide themselves from your computer so the average user would never know about them. Hijackers and things that hackers are going to use to get into your network, go through your files and steal information. Another aspect that I want to introduce is user control. And Windows, Vista, and 7 tried to bring this to the forefront. They tried to use user access control. It wasn't a good experience for the user. They basically tried to prevent you from doing everything. Even if it was your personal computer at home, it would try to prevent you from installing applications. That's certainly not the approach. Signature-based antivirus has no user control, whereas managed endpoint security can allow you to do all the way from no control to full control. And that's important because I'm going to talk about a couple scenarios where the users themselves will approve malware to be installed. Hackers are using social engineering, fake advertisements, fake emails, things like that to convince a user to open and run the program. And there's no malware, anti-malware in the world that is going to stop the user unless you have full control. If the user okays the install of something and they have permissions, that program's getting installed. And then of course some other features, firewalls, sensors and warnings, input-output control. You get basically managed endpoint security is the future. This is a technology that keeps evolving, keeps getting better, and when you invest in that path, your solution is just going to keep getting better, faster, stronger. Signature-based antivirus is on its way out the door, or it's already out the door. No one's really investing in that technology. It's just not today's threat. So again, just to summarize, the combination of the three heuristics, behavior-based detection, and application control or user management, those are really the three pillars of managed endpoint security. And that's how you're going to protect your customers against all classes of malware and really all modern threats that are out there today. So just to give a bit of an overview, behavior-based detection, as I mentioned, it's really looking for activity. So it's looking for suspicious actions that files and folders and applications are doing. Something really cool about behavior-based detection is it can intercept the calls that one program makes to another, evaluate it, and see what it's trying to do. So before something even executes, it can intercept it, look at that, say this is suspicious behavior, lock it down, and quarantine that file or program. When it comes to heuristics, you're doing something similar, but you're doing it more with rules. Heuristics is all about metrics, like I said. It's measuring the activity quantifiably and setting thresholds. And this is something that's really important because I know that there are many solutions that have this out there today. Something that you need to be careful of is a really good solution will know what a good file looks like, a good application looks like, and if it's not a good solution, it's going to give you too many false alarms or false positives. So you want something that's going to detect everything, but make sure that it doesn't alert you to healthy or well-performing programs, which are basically just false alarms that are going to take up your time and drain your energy. Another cool thing about heuristics is sandboxing. And that evaluates the actions that programs are performing, very similar to behavior-based detection, rather than the specific files. All in all, heuristics and behavior together, that's how you're going to protect your customer when the computer is trying to run rampant itself. And then user access control on the other side is how you're going to prevent users from doing any harm to the computer. So, we've seen this time and time again, people installing malware, people downloading the wrong programs, going to the wrong websites. We've seen the latest email phishing attempts, the fake emails from eBay, the fake emails from your bank website, telling you to log in, stuff like that. So as long as there are, simplistic users, people that are not tech savvy, there are going to be hackers that are going to exploit that and take advantage of it. So what you need is application control and user management. Because hackers today, these are very intelligent individuals. They know how to trick people into downloading things. You need a solution that's going to not, prevent the user from installing applications. A couple examples of this I've seen are, major video game releases, major mobile applications, major software launches. Grand Theft Auto 5 as an example, someone had created a fake beta website and it basically said, download Grand Theft Auto 5 for free here, and people were coming in droves to sign up, download this program and install it themselves, not realizing that it was malware, and they were opening themselves up to attack. Another example is, any program that's out there today. I know that, WhatsApp, which is a mobile app, someone had claimed to create a desktop version, and same thing, people went, they downloaded this so-called desktop version of WhatsApp, and they were installing malware and completely exposing themselves to hackers. So the thing about behavioral-based detection and heuristics, which I mentioned, is that malware can change its face. It can change its face to the end user, and it can say, I'm this new game, I'm this new application, you need to download me. But if you have behavior-based detection in the background, as soon as that program gets installed and starts behaving in the way that CryptoLocker behaves or another common application does, your solution is going to know that that's suspicious behavior and shut it down right away. But without that kind of a solution, without modern managed endpoint protection, there's really no defense to the user downloading and installing malware. So in summary, it's really those three pillars that are going to provide full protection. The behavior-based and the heuristics are going to do the protection for you, and the user control is going to prevent the users from actually saying, yes, please install some malware on my computer. Now, the benefits to a managed services provider or anybody who's running an IT business is, of course, you're going to protect your customers. So nobody wants to get the call from a customer saying, I installed this program, I've lost all my data, can you get my data back? And the answer is no, it's been wiped out, it's been hijacked. The hackers already have all your credit card information, now you have to go cancel all of your credit cards. It's going to protect them against user error. So something to be really careful of is not to do too much user control, right? So we don't want to prevent every user from installing applications. In general, let's just put a couple safeguards in place. If we know that we have some new hires or contractors, something like that, let's prevent them from installing applications or accessing certain things on the network. And something that's really interesting that managed security provides that no consumer antivirus is going to provide is it will automatically go out, crawl the network, and search for any new devices. So a user might come to you and say, I have 10 devices, and 3 of them I'm already purchasing antivirus for today. Can you protect the other 7? When you run your remote monitoring scan, if you have antivirus managed endpoint protection baked into your monitoring console, it's going to go out and it might detect there's actually 12 devices on the network. And maybe that business owner forgot that, there's 2 laptops tucked away, or there's a couple old application servers in a closet somewhere that we never use. Your monitoring solution is going to go out, detect those, and automatically deploy managed protection on them. That's something that they can't get with a Norton that they go to a website and purchase and have to go and install manual. On the flip side, so protection's great, your customers will be happy, but what about you? How does it make your life easier? Well, the great thing about a managed solution is it really does all of the scans for you automatically. Once you've set it up and you've said, yes, deploy managed security on these, X number of devices, it makes sure that those get deployed and stay deployed. Even if a user tries to uninstall security, it's going to automatically redeploy it as soon as they're done the installation. On the other side, you get that constant monitoring, so you're continuously auditing their network. You know that they're protected, and you get to generate these reports. So rather than saying, yeah, we deployed managed protection on 7 endpoints, you show them a report saying 7 out of the 10 of your devices have our service on them. We know that they're 100% protected. The other 3 we can't remotely monitor, so they're kind of an unknown, or we have to manually log in and check them. So you can send those graphical reports to your customers and really have that conversation with them. Now, the solution that Enable uses, we're pretty proud of. We did our due diligence, we looked around, and really we were looking for something that provided, top protection. So these charts here are showing, how much of the malware in a real world test was detected by each different program. And these are third-party tests, so Enable has nothing to do with these. This is really how we selected the solution that we wanted to use. And if you look at Bitdefender here, Bitdefender consistently has 100 or 99% protection in these real-world tests by AV Comparatives and AV Test and other third-party AV testing websites. And that's really why we decided to go with Bitdefender. The other thing that's important to note is you look down at the bottom, and this yellow line is how many false alarms did you get. So it's not only important that you can do 100% protection and block all malware, you want to make sure that you're not getting 8 false positives here. Those are 8 false positives you're going to have to go and deal with and manually say yes or no, those are good programs. Or over here when we have higher numbers. So Bitdefender consistently ranks, like I said, 100% protection or close to, and very, very low or 0 false positives. It continuously wins awards monthly, quarterly, annually. We're pretty proud that we're based on the Bitdefender engine. When we start to look at some of the consumer antivirus products out there, in the consumer market, Microsoft has the lion's share of the pie at 23%. Avast is next, then AVG, ESET, and Norton. So we look at these companies and we say, they have such a big portion of the market. How are they performing when it comes to protection? Well, Microsoft, we see that they're ranking at 0.5 out of 6 for protection. Avast, the second biggest in the market, and AVG, both ranking at 4.5 out of protection. So that's something that you can talk to your customer about is, you're paying X number of dollars a year, and your solution is letting out, how many percentage of virus and malware through the gates, whereas we know that Bitdefender is providing near 100% protection. So Enable's product, Security Manager, AV Defender, it really takes the power of Bitdefender and wraps it in a full management console. So Bitdefender is really the engine that protects your customers, and we just make it really easy to manage, deploy, report on, and just use as an IT business or a managed services provider. A question I always get asked is, yeah, but they're paying this much for a consumer antivirus. I can't come near to competing with that. And the truth is, when you start talking to them about maybe $5 a month for managed endpoint protection, you're getting pretty close to some of the consumer products that are out there. And certainly when you start scaling up to a few devices, if they have 5 devices or 10 devices, you're a very comparable offering to some of the prices that they're paying out there today. So with this chart, and again, you'll be sent these slides, so you'll have these numbers. With these numbers, you'll know how much they're paying. So when I have a conversation with a customer who's buying the AVG Internet Security Suite, I'm only $10 more than them, and I'm actually cheaper when it scales up to 5 devices. So something that's really important to note. So if you like what you heard today, if you think that's interesting, if you'd like to get your hands on N-central, on Security Manager, we encourage you to sign up for a 30-day free trial and give it a try yourself. This link will be active when we send you the slides, so you can just click on that and go right to the trial page. Or please visit us at enable.com and go under Products and Security Manager. So everyone, thanks very much for your time today. I'm pretty passionate about security. I think it's one of those topics that hits everybody wherever they are. Whether you're at home, you know that there are security threats. Today's small business understands it. It's one of those areas that, it's very easy for an IT business to go in and strike up a conversation with the average SMB. The trick is that you need to really be able to describe the ROI that you're going to provide that business. Talk to them about the levels of protection you can provide, versus what they're getting with that consumer antivirus that they may be buying. And certainly if they're just depending on, the free off-the-shelf, bottom-of-the-barrel antivirus, make sure you go through the today's modern threats with them. To talk about things like identity theft, hijacking, and information being stolen and resold to malicious third parties. Okay, so the first question we have is, do you need to pay for remote monitoring and security when you're deploying that on the average endpoint? And that's a great question. So something that we noticed is that a lot of managed services providers were collecting revenue for monitoring servers and some of the more expensive critical devices at a customer site, but not every customer wanted to pay for monitoring and management and IT support on the average workstation. So we came out with 2 sets of licenses with N-central, which is the remote monitoring and management platform. So N-central has a professional license. That's what you want to use to monitor a server or any device that you're getting paid to monitor. But something like a workstation, if the customer's not paying you for monitoring, we have an essential license which gives you all of the basic light monitoring features, health, status, and things like that. But it also lets you deploy antivirus, it lets you deploy patching, lets you backup, audit, do things like that. And whatever you're getting paid for, so if you're just being paid for antivirus and managed endpoint protection, that's all that you're going to be charged from Enable. So you basically deploy an essential license and then slap on managed endpoint protection on top of that license. So someone's asking, how does patching play into this? And that's a great question. I mean, patching is definitely critical when it comes to security. That's kind of another a la carte add-on that N-central has. So you can choose to sell somebody just patching. You could choose to sell them patching and security, which is very common. A lot of our partners are bundling together Security Manager and patching to protect that endpoint completely. Completely up to you, but I think that it's nice that we've given you that option to use the essential license to go in and just sell patching, just sell managed security, or sell both together. So someone's asking just for a quick recap on behavior-based detection. So just to recap that, behavior-based detection monitors the behavior of programs and files. It's not looking for a specific file signature like traditional antivirus did. So if I see a file that replicates at a certain rate, it doubles every 5 minutes, I can map that behavior or that pattern of activity to this type of malware. Or if I see a file or a program going around and encrypting a bunch of other files, WinZip is typically going to go and encrypt in a certain pattern, so I know it's not WinZip. That looks like CryptoLocker to me. So because of that behavior and how it's replicating and how it's locking files, I know that that's suspicious and I know that it's malware. I'm going to lock that out. Okay, so just our final question, we'll wrap up. Someone asking to review the licensing. So I'll do my best to explain this, but if you go on our website and go to request pricing, you can download the pricing guide where we go through how all of the individual components are priced. But the question here is specifically, what is an essential node? What is a professional node? There's basically one major difference between those two nodes. Essential licenses are virtually free. We give you a large pack of them when you purchase anything from Enable. So you have this pack of essential licenses, which you basically got for free. They do light monitoring, so they tell you everything you need about the endpoint. The big difference with professional licenses is you get Automation Manager built into professional licenses, which allows you to automate pretty much anything. So if you're paid to monitor a device, if you're paid to do weekly maintenance, monthly maintenance on a server, SQL maintenance, Exchange maintenance, Office 365 maintenance, you want to go professional and you want to use Automation Manager to basically do all of your service delivery for you and automate everything that you can. So I think that's it for our time today, everybody. Just wanted to say a huge thank you. Really appreciate you joining us today. Have a great day, and we'll send you the link to the webinar shortly. Thanks.